We're just about 24 hours away from week 3 fantasy football kicking off, and I'm just enjoying life with you guys, man. I know we are all just enjoying and taking in this fantasy football season in 2023. And obviously, guys, at the running back position specifically, there's been a lot of things and a lot of news and injuries that have completely changed the landscape of this position literally over the past week. We got tons of valuable information that we can move forward with. So today, it's the Saturday special. It's one of our most requested videos. We are going through every single matchup and finding the must start or sit running backs for week 3 fantasy football. And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you guys my underdog favorite sleeper flex option of the week. So make sure you watch to the end to catch that guy. And I'm filming this at midnight on Friday night, Saturday morning, and I'll be up all night making sure it gets out to you on time on Saturday morning. So please make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So let's go ahead and just start diving through these matchups, man. The first matchup on the board is the Falcons at the Lions here. Now in these videos, you always see a chart that I have on the screen, and in these start and flex territory categories, those are always in order in accordance with my rankings for the particular week in fantasy football. So you have Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, both of them are must starts, no question about it. Bijan Robinson is ranked higher for me, and he probably will be every single week until we see a significant volume change for Jahmyr Gibbs. Bijan Robinson has obviously been tremendous in fantasy football so far. I mean, this guy is clearly the superstar running back in Atlanta. He doubled his workload last week. He's going to continue this backfield takeover. And while I do still think that Tyler Algier in the flex territory is going to be involved, Bijan Robinson is definitely going to be the best running back in this backfield moving forward, and he always has been. And then we've got Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, Jahmyr Gibbs is always in must-start territory because he's such a good and efficient player with the ball in his hands. But David Montgomery is out of this game. He's doubtful, but he's not playing in this game. So Jahmyr Gibbs, I think the takeover starts this week. I'm not worried about his backup running back, which is Craig Reynolds. Jahmyr Gibbs was a top 15 pick in this year's NFL draft. They are definitely going to get him more involved this week. This guy is too explosive of a weapon on this offense in general for them to not use a ton this week. And then Tyler Algier, honestly, until further notice and until we see him just completely drop into like single-digit workload, he's going to remain a flex option for me. Tyler Algier, I believe, and I have said this for weeks now, I believe that the Atlanta Falcons offense is uniquely built to support two good fantasy football running back options. Obviously, the superstar is Bijan Robinson, but you've got a backup who's actually a very good backup, and he's making it really hard for them to take him off the field because he's been very good with the work that he's getting. So Tyler Algier, to me, in this type of matchup especially, where the Lions defense, they're not bad, not as bad as they used to be, but they're still taking time to develop. Tyler Algier, to me, is still going to be in flex territory. Like I said, until we see his workload just drop down to basically nothing. And then you sit Craig Reynolds, the Detroit Lions backup running back. As I alluded to earlier, I think that the David Montgomery injury is going to help Jahmyr Gibbs start to break out more than anything. I don't worry about his backup, which is Craig Reynolds. It's just not going to be there for me. We haven't even seen what he could do from a volume perspective, and I don't think that he's going to be taking a bunch of volume from Jahmyr Gibbs. Cordarrelle Patterson, if you still have him, don't start him. I mean, the guy has been irrelevant so far. Moving on to our next matchup, it's the Chargers at the Vikings this week. Could have potential to be a very, very high scoring fantasy matchup right here, which means that you'll want to get a lot of options here. I'm not sold on any of the running backs though. Nobody is a must start for me. I mean, here's the reality with these two guys. Honestly, they both have lower tier running backs right now. Austin Eckler already been ruled out for the game, so he's going to miss again, leaving Joshua Kelly as my favorite running back option in this particular matchup. And listen, I am not wild on Joshua Kelly either. He is not a guy that I'm looking to just go ahead and put on my roster and get him in the starting lineup. I mean, last week I called Joshua Kelly out for being a bad play because he was taking on the Tennessee Titans run defense, which is really good at stopping the run. They're a very good run stopping team. Can't defend the pass, but they can defend the run, and that's exactly why Joshua Kelly had a bad week this week, and it's why I got a lot of comments in my comment section this week asking me if they should drop Joshua Kelly. Don't drop him. He's a legitimate flex option this week. This matchup is so much better than it was last week. Minnesota's defense is simply not going to be able to put the clamps down on him like Tennessee's defense is. I like him as a better flex option than Alexander Mattison. He fell from grace for me. I mean, Alexander Mattison literally at this point is like a borderline bench guy. Only reason he's on here is because the workload is still his. He still leads this backfield. Not a super efficient guy at all, and he hasn't done much at all with his carries, and he's fumbled a lot too. But he's still going to be in flex territory as long as he continues to be the lead back, because this offense is not a bad offense at all. And I do think that he has potential to get you like a 2-touchdown type of game. And then you go ahead, sit everybody else. Nobody else is relevant in this matchup. Saints at Packers here, our next matchup this week. And obviously, this is still kind of a difficult situation to figure out because Aaron Jones is still questionable. He hasn't been ruled out for the game. I saw that he logged a little bit of practice time this week. Aaron Jones is still undecided to go for this game. And honestly, if I had to predict, he probably won't go again. But if he does go, he is going to be in start territory. Saints defense is a tough matchup for sure. But Aaron Jones is so explosive of a player that if he gets at least 10 touches, he could easily break off a nice big play for you like he did in week 1. But Aaron Jones, to me, is a lower tier start option right here. Flex territory, we've got Kendre Miller and A.J. Dillon. Obviously, Kendre Miller is in flex territory for a couple of different reasons. So the first reason is that not only is Alvin Kamara out, but Jamal Williams is now out. He is ruled out for this game against the Packers here. And Kendre Miller, who missed the first 2 weeks, rookie out of TCU, he's making his pro debut this weekend against the Green Bay Packers. I mean, listen, Jamal Williams hasn't had much success running in this offense yet, and I don't think that Kendre Miller is going to come out right away with like a 120-yard game, but he's the clear lead guy. I mean, there's literally nobody going to be challenging him for touches. He will get a Jamal Williams type of workload, which immediately makes him flex viable. A.J. Dillon is below Kendre Miller, honestly, because I really don't think A.J. Dillon is that good of a player. I think he's not that good. I mean, even with the workload over the past several weeks, he's not efficient. He's just not that good of a player. I acknowledge that if Aaron Jones is there, if Aaron Jones is not there, that A.J. Dillon is a legit flex option because workload. That's the only reason why. But if Aaron Jones goes, I got really no interest in playing A.J. Dillon. And then you go ahead and sit everyone else. Like I said, very similar to last matchup. Nobody else is relevant in this matchup. Texans at Jaguars is our next matchup on the list right here. You obviously start Mr. Travis Etienne. I've been saying it all week. This is going to be a great week for Travis Etienne. I love firing him up this week. He's in my top 5 running backs on week 3 fantasy football. I mean, there's just simply no way that this one doesn't work out. Texans are not good at defending the run. They're getting better as a defense as a whole, but they're still not like an elite defense stopping the run. I think Travis Etienne, coming off a bad week last week, is going to get ridden a lot this week. I would not be surprised if he has 20 to 25 touches in this game and he gets like a touchdown or 2 in this game. I love Travis Etienne. No way you're benching Travis Etienne any week, really, but especially against the Texans in week 3. Now, flex territory, Dameon Pierce is going to be here just because he's still leading the backfield. And although Devin Singletary has gotten more touches than I anticipated personally, Dameon Pierce still is the lead dog in this backfield, and he still does start out the game as the running back 1. Sort of similar to a Najee Harris situation, but I actually think that Dameon Pierce is actually a better player than Najee Harris. That's aside the point. Dameon Pierce still in flex territory because the volume is going to be there. And then you go ahead, you sit Tank Bigsby. Yeah, the guy that everybody loved during the offseason, and they said he was taking over the backfield, he had 0 touches last week. We're not playing Tank Bigsby, guys. It's just not happening. And I will take my victory on this one. We're only in week 3, obviously, but still, Tank Bigsby is not going to be played on my roster, and I would never advise my audience to play Tank Bigsby right now. Devin Singletary, same boat. The offense, I mean, listen, if you're splitting touches in a really bad offense on one of the worst teams in the NFL, I've got no interest. No interest at all. It'd be different, exactly like I said about Atlanta earlier, but this is not the Atlanta Falcons offense. You go ahead and you sit Devin Singletary. Moving on to our next matchup, we've got the Broncos going to Miami to take on the Dolphins, man. There's only one must-start guy, and honestly, I wrestled with Raheem Mostert in start category versus flex category. I elected going with him as a start. Raheem Mostert shot up my rankings this week for obvious reasons. He was very, very good against a pretty stout New England Patriots defense. I was impressed. I mean, obviously you know what the type of player Raheem Mostert is. Raheem Mostert is a big play threat. That's what he does. He's not going to handle 20 to 30 carries every single week. He'll have a couple games where he does handle that kind of volume, but it's never going to be consistent because the guy is in his 30s now. He's had an injury history, and he's never proven that he can handle that type of workload before. So you never really feel confident starting Raheem Mostert, but just from an upside perspective, he's got to be on this list in my opinion because the offense here, so explosive. Raheem Mostert, still an explosive player. I'll continue to play Raheem Mostert, especially against a really bad Denver Broncos defense that Brian Robinson ripped to shreds in week 2. Javonte Williams in flex territory in that upper tier, and what I really like to see is that I think his trajectory is pointing up. I mean, when you look at what him and Samaje Perine did last week, Javonte Williams still holds what he held in week 1. Samaje Perine had 1 touch in week 2. We see the direction this offense is going in. Javonte Williams, as long as he can start playing a little better, because I've watched him play a couple times this year, and he's not that explosive, hard to blame the guy. He's coming off a serious knee injury where he tore multiple ligaments. But this is a situation where I think that his trajectory is pointed up from a volume perspective, which is probably a good sign because I don't think that Sean Payton is the type of coach that's going to roll you out there if he doesn't feel like you're going to play good. You go ahead, like I said, sit Samaje Perine. Dude got 1 touch last week. He's getting phased out of this offense fast. Moving on to our next matchup, Titans at Browns this week. You start Derrick Henry, obviously. And I understand that week 1, a lot of people had concerns about Derrick Henry, including myself. I said, look at the guy's workload this week. They're clearly trying to get off of him a little bit. He bounced back, had a very good week 2. Still wasn't the beast that we remember him as, like from a 30 touch per game perspective. But Derrick Henry, you do not sit Derrick Henry. Flex territory, you've got Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford is in a situation where I think a lot of people, by weeks 5 or 6, I think a lot of people will look back and realize, man, I overpaid for Jerome Ford on the waiver wire. And it's always tough, right? In the waiver wire types of guys like Jerome Ford, this is a guy that just like stepped into the game versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, who a lot of people consider them to be a great defense. Newsflash, they're not. They're inconsistent, and they're dead last against the run in the NFL right now through 2 weeks. And they see him do what he did on Monday Night Football where everyone's watching, and he had over 100 yards after he stepped in the second quarter. So it's hard to blame people for thinking that Jerome Ford's going to be a stud, but this is a situation where, like I said, he played the dead last ranked running defense in the NFL this week. The Titans, very similar to a Joshua Kelly situation last week. The Titans are a tough run defense. I think this smells a lot like Joshua Kelly in week 2. And so Jerome Ford is really nothing more than a middle tier flex option for me right now. And that's best case scenario. You go ahead, you sit Tyjae Spears. I know he's getting a lot of hype right now. His snap count percentage went a little bit down, but his volume actually went up in week 2. So I understand why people are interested in him. It's not time yet. We haven't seen enough yet. And then Kareem Hunt obviously just signed with the Browns with the Nick Chubb unfortunate injury. Don't play Kareem Hunt right now. He just got back to the team this week. It's not time. And the coach, Kevin Stefanski, said twice this week that Jerome Ford was going to lead this backfield. It's not time for Kareem Hunt. Bills at Commanders is our next matchup here. And you're going to start James Cook. I feel very confident and comfortable telling you guys that James Cook is a legitimate start guy at this point. I mean, he did really well last week against a pretty tough Washington Commanders defense. He impressed me. And obviously, what we've known since the offseason is that James Cook is going to lead this backfield. What I did not know is that this guy would actually get close to 20 touches, because Bills running backs typically don't do that. James Cook had legitimate volume last week, and that's very encouraging for a guy like James Cook, who I think is going to be a legit start option moving forward because he's in a great offense that's hot and cold for sure, at least to start the year. But the offensive upside is so high. James Cook, to me, is a must-start guy right now. Brian Robinson in flex territory. I know. I've got a lot of people really disgusted with me about my distaste for Brian Robinson. I've seen a lot of comments about how dumb I am for saying Brian Robinson is not a great running back on a great offense. I mean, I don't know what's controversial about the great offense part. They're not a great offense, but Brian Robinson, to me, like, this is a volume play guy. Last week was, I think, his peak week in fantasy football, maybe in his history of his career. He's never provided a 30-point game before like he did last week. He was excellent last week, no doubt about it. He absolutely ripped apart the Denver Broncos defense, and he did well with the targets as well, which is something I didn't know he had in him. So I will say that I did not know he had this type of play in him. But moving forward, especially against a Bills defense that is pretty good stopping the run, I'm not really interested in Brian Robinson that much, aside from the fact that the guy's probably going to continue to get 20-plus touches per game. Sit Antonio Gibson, Damian Harris, everybody else. Those guys don't see the volume, and they're just not that good of players. Colts at Ravens is our next matchup here, and we're starting nobody. Nobody is a must-start here. Not saying you can't start any of them, but neither of these guys are must-starts. Gus Edwards is in a situation where, yes, he's in a better situation this week as far as matchup goes. And it's not that the Colts have a bad defense, by the way. I have actually said that the Colts defense is really, really good this year. They were inside my top 12 defenses in week 2, and they're a very, very good defense. I think their defense is very good. The reason he's in a good matchup situation is because the Colts have no Anthony Richardson. They're probably not going to put up points on the board to keep up with the Ravens, which will put the Ravens in a run-first game script, and there's no Justice Hill this week. He was ruled out this week. So Gus Edwards is probably going to handle 16 to 20 touches in this game. I think he's a legitimate flex option who rose up after the Justice Hill news, but I'm still not saying that he's a must-start type of guy. The talent just isn't all there. Zach Moss, similar situation. Obviously, waiver wire wonder last week, picked him up, had a lot of success on a lot of teams, I'm sure. But Zach Moss was taking on the Houston Texans. That is very important to note here. He's not getting the Houston Texans this week. The fun's over. Zach Moss is not that good of a running back. And like I said earlier, with both Jerome Ford and Josh Kelly, with these backup running backs, it's so matchup dependent. Backup running backs are just not good enough to handle really tough matchups, and this is one of them. So he's a flex guy for me in the lower tier. And then you sit everybody else. Nobody else is relevant. Either that or they're just injured. And honestly, both teams are riddled with injuries at running back, unfortunately. Patriots at Jets is our next game that we are going to go through. Ramondre Stevenson, you continue to start him. Now, I understand that Ramondre Stevenson doesn't have the highest upside. He doesn't have Travis Etienne upside, Tony Pollard upside, Derrick Henry upside, Christian McCaffrey upside. The list goes on. What he is probably one of the safest floors in fantasy football, though, because not only does he lead the backfield in carries on a week-to-week basis, but he also gets plenty of targets on a week-to-week basis as well. Why can you count on that? Because Mac Jones is not mobile. We say it all the time on this channel. Mobile quarterbacks don't check the ball down to running backs because they can move themselves. Immobile quarterbacks do check the ball down because they can't move once pressure's in their face, and they want to get that ball out of their hands. Ramondre Stevenson is there for Mac Jones checkdowns, and I am here, and you are here for those checkdowns as well because they matter in fantasy football. Continue to start him with confidence. Breece Hall, higher end flex option for me just because the guy is so good. Last week was bad. Obviously, not only was he playing the Dallas Cowboys defense, which was never a good matchup, but also 4 touches in this game. This team got some backlash for that. And Nathaniel Hackett tried to explain why he only got 4 touches. It wasn't a good reason. My guess is that he gets more touches this week because one of the guys you have to sit at this point, you cannot start Dalvin Cook. This guy, like, not only does he not look good, he honestly, to me, looks completely disinterested in this team. Like, once Aaron Rodgers went down, he was like, I don't even want to be here anymore. It's so clear who the better running back is in this offense, and so I think that the Jets recognize that. I honestly said last week, I think they were doing the right thing with Breece Hall because they realized they weren't winning that game against Dallas. And they figured, why do we need to get this guy out here just to get him hurt? Keep him safe and fresh for when we're actually competing. This is a week where they're competing to win this game. So I expect Breece Hall to have a healthy workload in this game. And like I said, you sit Dalvin Cook, you sit Ezekiel Elliott. these guys are just nothing more than insurance policies if either of these guys goes down, and they get to handle the majority of the workload. Panthers at Seahawks is our next matchup here, and I feel very good about this. I've been on board with Kenneth Walker for a long time now, and a lot of people were really worried about that week 1 performance. I said continue to start him, and he had a great game. He had a 2-touchdown game, was excellent in fantasy football for you. This continues to keep up. There's no competition in this backfield. Zach Charbonnet is not taking legitimate touches from Kenneth Walker either yet, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You continue to trot Kenneth Walker out there with plenty of confidence in your fantasy lineup. Miles Sanders is a flex option because of volume. And it disappoints me because not only is the offensive line bad, but Bryce Young is also out. So this offense in general is just taking a really bad turn for the worst. I mean, this is a bad offense entirely. And you really, as a rule of thumb in fantasy football, you really do not want running backs in fantasy football on bad teams. It's not a good combination. And then you go ahead, you sit everybody else. Nobody else is relevant, including Chuba Hubbard. And I will note, Miles Sanders is dealing with an injury this week. He's expected to go and play, though, this week. So just keep it in mind. He's expected to play, but he is injured. So maybe Chuba Hubbard has a little involvement. I'm still not playing Chuba Hubbard, though. Bears at Chiefs. Next matchup on the week right now. You start Isaiah Pacheco. And I know that a lot of people were asking me, where was Isaiah Pacheco in my running back rankings video earlier this week? That was a mistake that I omitted him. He was not meant to be omitted from that video. He's definitely in the top 20 running backs this week because the matchup is fantastic. It's a fantastic matchup against the Chicago Bears, who are not only just like reeling as a team, but their defensive coordinator just resigned this week after some really bizarre allegations, man. This defense, let alone the team, is in shambles. I mean, they're in shambles right now. I smell a complete butt whooping on Sunday from this game. So start your Kansas City Chiefs in this game, aside from maybe wide receivers, and we'll talk about wide receivers who are must start and sits later on this afternoon on Saturday. But Isaiah Pacheco, you definitely go ahead and put him out there. Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson, both flexible to me. Khalil Herbert still leads the backfield. Roschon Johnson has had some better fantasy finishes than Khalil Herbert, but Khalil Herbert still leads this backfield on a week-to-week basis. But Roschon Johnson is a legitimate play this week as well. I mean, Roschon Johnson, I called him earlier in the week on one of my other videos where I declared a underdog flex option of the week. I said he was my underdog flex option. I'm not going to cheat today. We're going to go a different route since we already picked him. But that should show you how I feel about Roschon. And you sit Jerick McKinnon. I think Jerick McKinnon's upside really comes more in those more competitive games where they're going to be rolling him out and flexing him as a wide receiver. Cowboys at Cardinals. This is easy, of course. I mean, we don't need to spend much time on this. Tony Pollard's a must start. This guy is probably going to be a top 5 running back in fantasy football this year, as long as he doesn't get hurt. He's on a tremendous offense, tremendous offensive line, legitimate team that is going to be competitive with every single team in the league this year. Never sit Tony Pollard. James Conner, I've had quite a few people this week tell me that I'm ridiculous for not putting James Conner inside of my top 25 or 30. I stand by it. This offense is just simply not very good. The upside is not that high, and especially this week against the Cowboys, where's the upside? There's no upside for James Conner. Only upside he has in fantasy football right now is that he is getting the majority of the targets because he's only one of the 2 functional pieces on this offense between him and Marquise Hollywood-Brown. Zach Ertz is functional as well, but he doesn't have the upside as a player that James Conner and Marquise Brown do. Sit everybody else. No question here. Steelers at Raiders. This is one to talk about, obviously. Josh Jacobs is a must-start to me. I've called Josh Jacobs a buy low trade target in recent weeks. I said earlier this week several times, fire out Josh Jacobs. I think he's going to be killer this week. I think this is his breakout week because, as we discussed earlier, the Pittsburgh Steelers are dead last in rushing yards allowed in 2023 so far. Very, very bad run defense here. They can't stop anybody. They're going to the West Coast here, taking on the Vegas Raiders here. This is an easy decision. Must start Josh Jacobs. I think he has a breakout week. Najee Harris, I mean, we're getting really close to having Jaylen Warren be ranked above him. For those of you who don't know, I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I've been watching them since I can literally remember because it runs in the family bloodline. But my fantasy football analysis comes first. And what I know about this team is that Mike Tomlin likes Najee Harris a lot. After reading some comments this week about him and Jaylen Warren, he sounded pretty unsure about how the running back workload was going to break down moving forward. This is on watch right here. Najee Harris is officially on notice. I still think he's flexible, but both of these guys are both lower tier options at flex because the offense sucks, and neither one of them has shown real significant fantasy upside this season. Sid Zamir White, not important enough to really even discuss right now. Eagles at Buccaneers, our next matchup here, the first Monday night matchup this week. Nobody's a must start this week. I know. Rachaad White, DeAndre Swift, they're both coming off great weeks in fantasy football. They're all in flex territory. And really, they're all high-end flex guys. Rachaad White is definitely a higher-end flex guy because he clearly showed that he's capable of having big plays. But this is a matchup here that you just don't want to have to play. The Eagles front seven is going to get after this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. I think Rachaad White struggles this week and comes back down to earth. DeAndre Swift, this complicates itself because I read reports today that Kenneth Gainwell, while he is questionable for this game, he is expected to go. That's what I've read. Can't confirm it, but I have read that he is probably going to play this weekend, and that makes it questionable for what this running back workload is going to be. I have questions on this. That's why they're both in flex territory. I'm uneasy about both of them, and so I don't have a ton of confidence in either. I will say that from a Philadelphia Eagles coaching perspective, it's probably really hard to put DeAndre Swift back on your bench and only give him 2 touches like they did in week 1 after his week 2 performance. That is definitely something to note. Sit Sean Tucker, just not relevant enough yet. Hopefully he will become that. I'd like to see him do it, but it's not yet. Last matchup of the week, Rams at the Bengals this week. You start both of these star running backs here. Kyren Williams has become a must start. I took my L on the Rams earlier this week, and Kyren Williams is a must start guy. I mean, this guy has been tremendous. He's the running back 2 right now in fantasy football. The matchup is not bad here. You have to ride the wave with Kyren Williams. There's just no other explanation for it. Joe Mixon as well. You continue to play Joe Mixon because he's clearly the running back 1 in this offense. Joe Burrow, if he doesn't play, he's still going to be a must-start guy for me because they're probably going to lean on him a lot. But obviously, his ceiling is definitely lowered without Joe Burrow. And then everybody else, you don't even think about playing them at all. As promised, my Underdog Flex option of the week. I already picked one earlier this week. This is my backup guy right here for those of you who may not have Roschon Johnson. I'm going with Kendre Miller, another rookie running back this year on the New Orleans Saints. Listen, Kendre Miller is obviously in a tough predicament right here. Hasn't played an NFL game yet in the regular season. And the matchup is not easy. It's against the Packers. It's not a super great matchup. But Kendre Miller has no competition this week. Jamal Williams is out, and Alvin Kamara is still suspended. Kendre Miller legitimately has a really good opportunity to prove that this guy can be the future of this offense. He's got no competition this week, no Alvin Kamara in his way. This guy has a legit shot to prove his worth to this team this week. And I like this guy coming out of college pretty good. I think he takes advantage of this opportunity, and there's a chance that he has a really good game this week. So let me know what you think of these guys in the comments below and what questions you need answered before week 3 fantasy football. And if you're looking to make some trades before week 3 fantasy football and want to know what the best trade strategies and guys to target are right now, click on this video right here.